everyone. Hello, I'm Dan Woodman. I'm a sociologist at the University of Melbourne, and I'm the chair of the LOC for our event today, this week. So later I will welcome you to this Congress. But it is not my place to welcome you to this place. We are meeting on unceded lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nations, and my first task is to hand you over to and introduce the Djirri dancers. So they are a Wurundjeri all-female dance group and also traditional custodians in this land, which is called Naam. Djirri means willy wagtail in the Woiwurrung language of the Wurundjeri people. The willy wagtail is a spirit bird, and it gave them the dance. Many of the group have danced since they were young children, while others have learnt as adults. As part of this welcome, you will also hear from Mandy Nicholson, who will be singing in Woiwurrung, the language of the Wurundjeri people. And you'll watch that language come to life through their dance. So Mandy Nicholson is an elder and will also welcome us to this place. So now I'll introduce the Djirri dancers.
My mic here? Yes. Hello everybody. My name's Mandy Nicholson. I'm a Wurundjeri woman, and I also have connections to the Dja Dja Wurrung and Nura-Ilim Wurrung language groups of Victoria. So those that are from the other side of the world, please put your hand up. I want to see how many guests we've got here from different countries. Wow, nearly everybody. That's fantastic, and thank you for coming to this beautiful country. But I just wanted to talk a little bit about who we are and what we do. And because I know I had to look up the definition of sociology, because I knew, social things, but I wanted to know the nitty-gritty of it all. And it's all about studying maybe an individual in society or societies as a whole. Am I correct? Yeah? I'm wondering if any of you guys have studied sociology in regards to First Nations people. If you put your hand up again, if you have. Yep. And how many have done studies on First Nations people in Australia? One hand. Put your hand up really high. 1, 2, 3, maybe 4. That's got to change. Because in the 1800s, we had 18 Wurundjeri people left. We numbered, in this country of Australia, we numbered hundreds of thousands. And then in the 1800s, when this city was built, 18, think of that number, 18 of us survived. So what a perfect area of study would be to study how have we survived? How have we continued our cultural practices? One's happening right now next to me, up here on stage. How have we maintained our societal structures when invasion destroyed our society and our structures and where we fit in our communities? Where does that leave our men and their roles? Where does it leave our women with their roles? Where does it leave our elders and their roles? It's something that's a very important topic to include in your studies, because how do we as First Nations people survive our dual lives? And sometimes it's more than just two lives. We've got our day-to-day life where we work, we study, go to school, and do all those things that help us survive financially. But how do we balance that with our cultural life, where that sustains our spirituality, our identity, our presence, and our relevance when we live in an urban environment? That's our journey. The dancers that you'll see come up on stage in a minute. That's our exact journey. Because without doing dance, without doing language, speaking language, singing in language, if you take language away from people, from culture, from society, it obliterates everything. So I've got Lynette here, she's helping me with this smoking ceremony, and I know that there's other cultures around the world and spiritualities that do a smoking ceremony, and I'm timing how long I speak to how much smoke is in the room, because sometimes we do get a lot of smoke, and I can't really even see you now, there's a little bit of smoke, and we want to maintain that you guys can still breathe, but also get the importance of why we do our ceremonies like this. So, as I mentioned, the 1800s were a very, very bad time all around the world for First Nations people. I think England invaded over 200 odd countries, and it's something that the Pacific especially was affected, and it's something that culture, cultural practices, ceremony, song, dance, especially women's ceremony, dance and language, that was not recorded down as often as the men's cultural stuff was. So it's been an extra hard journey for First Nations women to maintain cultural practice. Again, everything that I'm speaking about now is a perfect topic for discussion in your 6-day conference, that's a long one, but also in your studies, because the world needs to know how we have survived, how we maintain our cultural practices. There's no speakers of the Woiwurrung language, that's my mother tongue. I do a little bit of language, but we don't have it as our first language, unfortunately, but we will make change there. We are making big changes to create our young ones have that firm cultural foundation of language. So it's something that in this state of Victoria, if you're not from here, it's a relatively small state, or small part of this country, of this continent, and there's 38 First Nation languages. Within those languages, there's different dialects. So within the Wurundjeri people, a member that I'm a member of, there's 5 different dialects, but they're all Woiwurrung speaking. So they're the clans of Wurundjeri. And all the language groups around Victoria and Australia, but I'm focusing on Victoria at the moment, identify by their language name. And you'll see around the place, if you look into it a little bit more, if you go to the museum, there's a First Peoples exhibition there, you'll notice that a lot of the language names end in wurrung, and wurrung means mouth. But Wurundjeri people, we don't identify under that. And it's not because we want to, it's because out of those 5 clans, 1 survived, and that was Wurundjeri. So we identify under an umbrella of the name Wurundjeri. So that just shows the destruction of culture and language has made us identify by the only surviving clan of the Woiwurrung speaking people. So today we number in the low thousands, and on a funny note, my grandmother liked having lots of children. She had 16, she had 16. So she brought our population up just by 1 woman. So I've got lots of cousins, lots of aunties and uncles, but it's because of trailblazers like her and my bloodline. I can go back way, way, way back, but my bloodline is full of strong, staunch, powerful men and women. There's a building at the end of Swanston Street. So Swanston Street's pretty much where Swanston Street, the Flinders Street station, and it's where the trams go, you're not allowed to drive. You look right up the end of that street, you'll see a big building with a face on it. That face is a silhouette of Barak, or William Barak. He's my 3rd great uncle. His sister Annie is the lady, our matriarch, the one lady that we all are connected through blood. Without that woman, we wouldn't exist today. We originally were patrilineal through the male, but because that line sadly demised, we had to flip over to matrilineal to survive. Again, lots of research topics in what I'm saying. So I just wanted to share a little bit of background of who we are, our journey, and how we keep our culture and language and ceremony alive today, because it's something that it may take one person in your community to take the lead, take that leap of faith and jump into everything to get everything happening again. One cultural practice that stopped happening for 3 generations was possum skin cloak making. So we call wulurt. It's a cloak made of possum skins, and it's basically defined as culture. You would define it in one word, culture. So that practice was revived by three beautiful, powerful women artists, Yorta Yorta and Gunditjmara artists. And people like that are making change in this world. Another way that we keep our culture alive is through song and dance. And I worked at a First Nation language centre for 6 years, which enabled me to grab a hold of how the structure of language works and how to pronounce the words. And from there, I was able to translate little nursery rhymes and songs and then into cultural songs. So our dances are reflective of what we see around us. We go out and watch the water flowing in the river. The river that flows through the heart of Naarm, Naarm meaning bushland, is the Birrarung, or the River of Mist. And if you get up early enough, I don't know if you will if you're jet lagged, but go out there and you'll see the mist dancing on top of the water. So we observe things and we name things by what we can see. We also create our dances from watching the animals. So some of the animals are pretty strange in this country from international eyes, but they're unique and they're beautiful and cute. But the cutest ones are the ones that might rip your eyes out, so be careful. Be careful of koalas. But literally, we watch how the birds interact with each other. We watch how they interact with the ground, the earth, the sky, everything. We just listen to them as well. And our dances are always honouring our ancestors, those animals, the environment around us. So when I talk about Naarm, I talk about it as a cultural landscape, not a specific sacred site here or there. The whole landscape is sacred. So when I welcome people to country, it's all about acknowledging, remembering country, looking at country differently, grabbing a leaf, looking at the veins in that leaf and comparing it to our veins in our arm, the veins that rivers flow over country. It all is connected. So there's 6 layers of country. The Bikut is below country where we get ochre, which we decorate our bodies with. Bikdu is on country where we do our ceremonies and dances, and we still do it today in the middle of the city as well. And we do ceremony. So ceremony, you'll see the girls wearing possum skins as a belt. They get that belt when they go through a ceremony called Murum Turu Kuruk, and it's a coming of age ceremony. So Murum or Maram means body, Turu is the reeds that they wear, and Gruk is the word ending that means female. And it's something that hadn't happened for 185 years, and we brought it back in 2015, and we've done it ever since. And then we've got Banyabik, which is water country. So water country is all about the life-sustaining layer, life-sustaining factor of everything. It's in our bodies, it's in the oceans, it's in rivers. And part of our welcoming ceremonies, we use water, but I would not today, sadly, get a glass of water from the river and make you drink it. But usually we would, because that means everything's safe while you're here. But the river, the water is sick. So the reason we do our smoking ceremonies is that when you put the green gum leaves on there, it creates a steam. Like, I don't know if you were observing when we brought it out, it was like a grey smoke. But when Lynette put the leaves on there, blocking the oxygen off, it turned into tufty white smoke. And that is basically steam coming through the leaves, releasing the eucalyptus oil, and it has healing properties. So that's why we do this ceremony, and it's one ceremony that has always happened. So very glad that we can say that's never stopped. But it's about cleansing you. You might have bad energy, you might have bad vibes, bad feelings, you might be feeling crappy today. It just cleanses you. And then we've got Murrunmutpik, which is wind country that blows the smoke from the fires, all the way up to Bunjil. So our creator spirit here in this part of the world is Bunjil, the wedge-tailed eagle. So the biggest eagle in Australia, and he's got all these different spiritual helpers, and they're usually birds. So one of his second man in charge is Wah the raven. You'll see him all around the city. And then we've also got parrots as well that are also his helpers. But where he watches us and guides us from is Wurrubik, or sky country. And then we've got Darangolkbik. So Darang is our word for tree, Golk is stick, and Biik is country. So it's star country, but just listening to the description in the name tells you it isn't just stars up there. So we've got Bunjil as the star Altair, part of the Aquila constellation, which means eagle. And we connect to the stars. We remember to look up at the stars at night, especially when it's flooded out with artificial light. So they're all the beautiful spiritual layers of country. And we're going to do a dance that welcomes you here. And the word Womanjika, you'll see it around the city. But you break it, it's usually described as welcome, but when you break it up, woman means to come from somewhere, which you all have today. G is an instruction of being asked, and ka is purpose. So our first dance is our woman jika nyarka, and you'll see the girls dancing with their gum leaves to represent that symbolic gesture of cleansing. But first, I wanted to acknowledge you. I wanted to acknowledge all of my ancestors, all those trailblazers that have led the way for me to be able to stand here in front of people today and talk confidently and proudly about my culture because it was suppressed for so long, and also the different layers of country. Biladu nyan wangat naranik mandi, waranjeri wilimik, waranjeri balakut, mundanai murup gelada birang, mundanai kiripik, mundanai pupup nakurenik, ba lalal ba gugung nugulik, ba bikut bikdui, banyubik, mernmut bik, wuruwuru bik, ba tarangok bik, ba bunjalal wilimu. Thank you. We're going to do our welcome dance now, so sit back and enjoy. Waranjere al naramu. Waranjere al naramu. Waranjere al naramu. Bambocho maninga. Bambocho maninga. Wanganino, tula pagarok. Wanganino, tula pagarok. Ngagaje, 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 ngagaje. Wanganino, tula pagarok. Wanganino, tula pagarok. Ngagaje, 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 ngagaje. Winmaleo, coreno, calen bariamo, momelamo, woman jeka, woman jeka. Thank you. And we'll just finish off now with one more quick dance, and it's all about those layers of country that I was explaining. And apologies for my croaky voice. I've had a week off and I haven't been practicing with my vocal cords, so if it cracks, that's just the way it is. You've got to deal with it. So the next final dance that we're going to do is our Bik Nyarga, honouring the below, on, water, wind, sky and star countries. So just a couple of moves in here. I won't explain the whole dance, but a couple of the moves that I like the best are when the girls are swinging their leaves around their mouth, and it's when I'm singing ngolo, and ngolo is our word for voice. Another one is we're thanking Bunjil, giving back to Mother Earth, we're thanking Bunjil, and we're representing our hips as women, because we always think about walking on country, walking around with our feet, but it's our hips that are the most important, because we hold our babies there, we guide people, it drives us. So I told you I wasn't going to tell you all the song, but that's only a little bit of it. All right, we'll do this one and we'll finish off with this one. Thanks. Waranjere, waranjere al narapo, 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 narapo. Waranjere, waranjere al narapo, 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 narapo. Tarangak, tarangak bik, bunjalal, bunjalal, welamo, 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 welamo. Tarangak, tarangak bik, bunjalal, bunjalal, welamo, 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 welamo. Woro, 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 woro bik, bunjuang, bunjuang, nga, 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 nga. Woro, 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 woro bik, bunjuang, bunjuang, nga, 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 nga. Mernmut, mernmut bik, wuranga, wuranga, ngolo, 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 ngolo. Mernmut, mernmut bik, wuranga, wuranga, ngolo, 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 ngolo. Ban, ban bik, umbrella, umbrella, morenda, morenda,
morenda, morenda. Ban, banyabek, yumrala, yumrala, morenda, 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 morenda. Big, big doe, yambalak, yambalak, ngarka, 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 ngarka. Big, big doe, yambalak, yambalak, ngarka, 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 ngarka. Big, big goatero, no, 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 ngarembel, 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 ngarembel. Big, big goatero, no, 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 ngarembel, 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 ngarembel. Nungojan, thank you.
Thank you to Mandy and the Jiri dancers. So that was a welcome to country, which is delivered by the people who own these lands, the traditional owners. Visitors on this land, including settlers, can acknowledge country, acknowledge the ownership of this place. And I want to acknowledge the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people of the Kulin Nation and pay their respects to elders past and present, and also the elders of all First Nations communities who are visiting with us here at the Melbourne Convention Centre. So Mandy spoke about the significance of this river, the Birrarung, that our conference centre is on. So this has been a meeting place, a source of life and a meeting place for over 40,000 years, a place to build community and exchange ideas. So we're getting just a touch of that experience of knowledge built over many millennia. My sense of place has changed over the last few years since we won the bid to host this conference. It's wonderful to have you with us for this event in Naarm, in Melbourne, if you're here in person, but also if you're joining us from around the world in a way that technology allows. Not all of you, or maybe not many, will know that Melbourne had one of the longest lockdowns in the world during our pandemic. I thought it was the longest. Our local media told us it was the longest. I had an invitation from our wonderful colleagues in the Philippines Sociological Society last year to come and visit them and said this. And they quickly put me in their place and said, no, Manila had the longest lockdown. And I think there's a few other places. Welcome to our Filipino colleagues. Welcome. I think there was also a city in Peru that had a similar length lockdown. Melbourne does sometimes want to claim a place higher up the list than we deserve, particularly if we can get above Sydney one way or another. But either way, we were definitely one of the longest lockdowns in the world. We had 262 days over about a year and a half, where if you weren't an essential worker, you were essentially limited to your house and then a period of recreation within your own neighbourhood. During that time, I got a new sense of place. I saw my neighbourhood in a different way, the way the seasons changed, the way the temperature would adjust, the water moved differently when the rains came, because it was one thing to pay attention to apart from doom scrolling on Twitter as well. I think just like we are joining here to meet on a place that people have met and shared knowledge for 40,000 years, that gave me just the briefest sense of what the kind of connection and knowledge of place that comes from a culture that survived and then thrived and again thrives after over 40,000 years here in this place. So Australia has an image maybe as associated with iconic ideas about the outback, but we're actually one of the most urbanised societies in the world. We're also a multicultural society. In the early 20th century, Australia was seen as a social laboratory. We had the early enactment of female suffrage, the secret ballot, industrial arbitration and pensions. And Melbourne was central to many of these things. I was able to host some of the amazing junior scholars in ISA this week, and we showed them where the 8-hour-day protest marches began in Australia for an 8-hour workday. So today we give well, we've learned to give greater recognition, not just to this progressive history, but how profoundly negative the legacies and current history and present of Australia is, particularly the effects of colonisation on our First Nations people, the First Nations people in this country. So sociology in Australia has had an ambivalent role. We've played a role in the enactment and understandings of these legacies that I've just discussed, the positive but also, unfortunately, the negative. And I just wanted to, early on in our opening, acknowledge and make an apology that we as the LOC have not done well in all areas of organising this Congress. Particularly with the session, the LOC was given some local sessions to organise, and particularly with one of these sessions that was focused on the work of our First Nations colleagues. And I just want to acknowledge now and apologise, because the LOC should have handed over full leadership of that session to our First Nations colleagues here in Australia. Consultation is not adequate. It never was, and it definitely isn't now, and full leadership is always required. And I want to thank the leaders of Indigenous sociology in Australia, the ones who challenged us as an LOC, and apologise again for not handing over full leadership of that session from the very beginning. But I do want to particularly thank TASA, the Australian Sociological Association's Indigenous portfolio leader, Joanne Schmeider, who really led the LOC in improving our approach. I also want to note that the current executive of TASA, the Australian Association, and the ISA are working on policies and procedures that will embed Indigenous leadership as an expectation in all these things. Joanne also helped us work on an acknowledgement of country for you all. So visitors on this land should acknowledge the country, and we've provided text in each room, and we ask the chairs of each session to make an acknowledgement as we go through our Congress meeting here. So we've now been welcomed to this country, and I do want to say welcome to the Congress, but really I want to hand over now to the person who's put together this Congress and leads this Congress, which is the current president of the ISA, and he has told me that he might be counting down the days until his amazing term, extended term over these COVID years comes to an end, but he has one very important final and I think joyful task, which is leading us through this week of discussion and debate. So I'll now welcome to the stage Professor Sari Hanafi, the president of the International Sociological Association.
Good evening, everyone. Dear Chair of the Australian Local Organising Committee, Dan Woodman, dear President of Australian Sociological Association, TASA, Alphia, Possamai-Inesedy, dear Joe Lindsay, co-convener of the Australian Local Organising Committee, dear participant in the 20th Congress in Sociology, World Congress, Chair Sally Daly, Executive Officer of TASA. Finalement, on est à Melbourne, on se rencontre en présentiel et en mode hybride. Don't worry, I will not continue in French. Once we decided to change the date of the World Congress of Sociology, many questions remained. Should it be online, hybrid, or in person? Who could not make it? Who would still be fearful of coming too close to others? After almost 3 years of online meetings due to COVID-19, this major in-person event appears as a historical moment. By the way, it's a historical also for me personally. A few days ago, I was here in Melbourne. A law passed regarding the alteration of the Constitution to recognize and establish an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander voice. this will be the first step in the referendum, and hoping the outcome will be positive, acknowledging the indigenous people in Australia. So here I joined Dan on his warm acknowledging of the question of indigenous people in Australia. It is a great pleasure for me to welcome you all from all over the world who have the pain to travel from far, even very far. One student told me that travel 32 hours to reach here, 4 connections. So this 20 World Congress is really unique and particular, and we are celebrating it for 2 reasons. First, 81 years after our first Congress, which started with a limited number of participants and research committees, it now gathered thousands of sociologists from all over the globe and keep strive to ensure better diversity and inclusivity in terms of region, career stage, and gender. The regularity of these congresses demonstrate the capacity of ISA to build a bridge between different scientific communities, even during the Cold War. Part of my presidential project during these 5 years has been to work on the specificity of this 20th edition. The global mapping sociologists were all ISA past congresses and forums, abstract of sessions, and their presenters' details are now online. Believe me, it's a wealth of information. I look to how sociology of family changed paradigms, and by looking how we study family in the 60s, in the 70s, 80s is a wonderful. So please log on and use it. 2 reports were also commissioned to study plenaries at past congresses and examine the development of some research committees, their changing forum and content in terms of topic, theories, and methodologies, as well as the nature of national associations' participation in congresses. I hope many of you will be interested to attend a session of former presidents where they will discuss these 2 reports. So it's a session called Former President, and one report is written by Giselle Sapiro and the other by Tom Dwyer. Additionally, our academic writing workshops are here to enhance the participation of young researchers from the Global South, not only in our congresses, but also in ISA participation. You will see one of our laureates of junior world sociology competitions. She told me that she got to know about the competition through this academic writing workshop in Sri Lanka. So really, we should not underestimate the importance of face-to-face encounter and not to rely only on information present in the website. This 20 Congress is also unique for being our first hybrid one, setting forward new rules for reducing our carbon footprint in a digital, post-COVID, sustainable-oriented age. We envisage different scenarios, but the outcome has been most encouraging, with more than 6,400 submitted abstracts. The program coordinator did a great job assessing the submissions. When we choose the theme for the Congress, Resurgent Authoritarianism, Sociology of a New Entanglement of Religion, Politics, and Economy. Authoritarianism was not as widespread as it is now, including in the global north. Its growth has been facilitated by the gradual symbolic thickening of public culture through combination of extreme nationalist and religious fervor, notably when the national conservative and illiberal forces project replace the liberal political project, and public reason become incapable of dealing with either a unified conception of justice or different conceptions of the good in society. With more hierarchical polarization in society, we live in a time when reasonable public debate is often impossible. There are demagogical times animated by the vertiginous rise of populism and many levels of misunderstanding between religious and the secular in our scholarship and media, and in their relationship to politics, economy, and culture. Religiosity is increasingly in many regions, and secularism has become, in some countries, a civic religion against other religions, particularly those of population originated from migration. The Congress program has been the subject of many meetings of the program committee. This committee is composed by 4 VPs. I would like to thank them not only for this work on this committee, but for 5 years of active leadership for ISA, Geoffrey Players, Philemon Guterres, Elvisa Martin, Sawako Shirahaz. Also to thank the 4 members of the Research Coordinator Committee, Hiroshi, Ishida, and Alison Lokonto, Suzanne Daniel, and Suzanne Shahrukni. And also the other 4 members from ISA National Association Liaison Committees, Borut Ronchovic, Elena Wanas, Bandana Borkayasta, and Sili Scallon. But also head of the local organizing committee, Dan Woodman, not only for his work on this committee, but also has shouldered tremendous logistic work with his colleague in local organizing committee. Another thanks as well to the invited ISA members, external to executive committee, Armando Salvatori. Here in this terrific program, with most of the speakers are in person, it also was subject of long deliberation by the program coordinators and ISA executive committee members. I am sincerely grateful as well to the terrific work of our executive secretary, Isabella Barleniska. Please give her a clap. Who, alas, will retire soon after 40 years of active service for ISA. Imagine 40 years. I cannot bear ISA after 5 years. I mean, Isabella bear ISA 40 years. Can you imagine? But also her team, Juan Licharga, Lola Busotil, and Cecilia Delicado Molina, who will become our forthcoming ISA Executive Secretary starting from August of this year. Since our last Toronto Congress, we have lost some outstanding sociologists who left their deep intellectual legacy in our ISA and sociological community. Of course, I should start with our former ISA president, Margaret Archer, who died in May this year, but also Alan Touraine in this month. 2 tributes, by the way, assigned in our Congress for Alan Turing and Margaret Archer. And before them, Annabel Quijano, Emmanuel Wallenstein, also another former president, and also Eric Ollenwright. May their memory be eternal. Let us have a moment of silence for all their memory. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sari. We had a lot of meetings about this Congress, as you would expect. I talked before about these 262 days we spent in lockdown. I'm sad to say, maybe happy to say, my social life during that time was basically joining an ISA committee at 11 p.m. on a Saturday night, maybe with what I said was a herbal tea in a mug, but who knows what it really was, to discuss what we were going to do about this Congress. And I just wanted to thank everyone who joined all those meetings on Zoom at all kinds of odd hours. When you are an international community, it means you are sometimes up at odd hours to be part of it. And Sari and the committees, the program committee, the executive committee, made some difficult decisions in difficult times. And you all did it, the National Association's research committees that were part of this, with a clear head, with compassion and sensibly when the world was making that difficult to do. And we're so happy that we could have this conference here in Melbourne, but also one where our colleagues can join us from around the world when they cannot travel. So thank you, Sari, for your wonderful leadership and to all the ISA in these difficult times. So I now have the great pleasure of welcoming and handing over to my co-convener on the local organising committee, Professor Joe Lindsay.
Good evening, everybody, and a very warm welcome to you all for the 20th ISA World Congress here in Naarm on behalf of the local organising committee. The last time we hosted a World Congress in Australia was in 2002 in Brisbane, and it's just wonderful to have you all here today. I'm also pleased to acknowledge the past and present Kulin Nation, Wurundjeri Woiwurrung, as the sovereign people here, the cultural knowledge holders who maintain and promote the Naarm Aboriginal law, customs and custodianship responsibilities for country, and the people that the country continues to sustain generation after generation into the future for all of us. And warm thanks to Mandy and the Jura Jura dancers for giving us a lot to think about as well as to be entertained by. Let me begin with a heartfelt thanks to all of the people who made this Congress a reality. And firstly to our leader, Dan Woodman. I was going to call him our fearless leader, but actually he is fearless, but he's also a very kind and inclusive leader, but he still manages to get things done. So thank you, Dan, for all of the hard work that you've done to get us all here today. I am delighted to thank the local organising committee, and I would like you to put up your hand very high and wave it so that people can see you as I call out your name. We had Netta Bromdahl, we had Brendan Churchill, we had Catherine Hastings, we had Kim Humphrey, Sonia Martin, Teresa Petre, Alphia Possamai-Inesedy, Brady Robards, Georgia Van Toon, and Anna Halifoff and Shanti Robinson and Katie Hughes were also members of the committee at earlier points. Thank you to our local organising committee. Sincere thanks to TASA's Indigenous Portfolio Leader, Joanne Schneider. Thanks for your invaluable advice along the way. And warm thanks to our wonderful volunteers who are critical to the functioning of the Congress. So those of you who are in the room, please raise your hand so that we can give you a clap in advance as well to our wonderful volunteers. Maybe they're all out at the front desk. Sincere thanks to the ISA President, Sari Hanafi, and the Conference Program Committee, the ISA Executive Committee, ISA's Council of National Associations and the Research Council, and TASA's Executive Committee. Thanks to the team at the Melbourne Convention Bureau and to our sponsors, particularly the State Government of Victoria for their generous support, and to Monash University as a gold sponsor. And finally, we are sincerely grateful to Isabella Barlinska and the team in the ISA office and the amazing Sally Daly, the Executive Officer of TASA, for the incredible amount of work that you have done in organising the Congress here. So, yes, please. Australian sociologists are a diverse and a thriving cohort, and we're passionate about making a difference to the world through our scholarship. We are, of course, peppered throughout the program and the research committees and on the working groups. But I'm also delighted here to draw your attention and warmly invite you to the Australian thematic sessions, which are on at 2 p.m. each day starting tomorrow. For all of the wonderful things about this country, Australia has a mean streak, a shameful, violent and repressive history and present, with struggles and social problems that need to be acknowledged, halted and repaired. And we tackle these important issues in the Australian thematic sessions. So on Monday, we have the Sociology of Refugees, Asylum and Border Control in Australia. And we have leading Australian sociologists and Behrouz Bashani, the incredible award-winning Kurdish-Iranian writer who wrote his book, No Friend But the Mountains, during 7 years of incarceration by the Australian government. On Tuesday, we have the social and political implications of climate change. And as you know, Australia is a land of fire, drought and flood. And in this session, we hear from 4 great thinkers on how to understand and act on the climate emergency. And great Indigenous scholarship is woven through the program. And we recognise the important contribution of First Nations thinkers that have made to sociology, including challenges to our dominant ways of thinking. And I thank all First Nations delegates attending the conference for their contributions to knowledge in the discipline. On Wednesday at 2 p.m, we have an Australian thematic session on Indigenous scholarship where we profile the work of 4 of our fabulous Australian-based First Nations scholars on the continuing impacts of colonialism and authoritarian politics and governance. And on Thursday at 2 p.m, the Australian thematic session we tackle then is the reshaping of inequality in Australia. We are a wealthy country, but we have deeply embedded and often intersecting dynamics of inequality here. And so I warmly invite you to come and be challenged and enriched by this discussion. So, as you know, the World Congress is like the Olympics, or perhaps it's like the World Cup. It runs once every 4 years, and there's a competitive bidding process where countries go and prepare a bid to win the Congress. And it's really quite a big deal to have the opportunity to host it. The ISA is a truly international association, and the best and the brightest from around the world come together to share ideas, to debate, to question, and to push our discipline forward. I'd like to thank you all for speaking English in the sessions over the next week that we have together. I can't help but think, with you all here, that in this city with us, that the air will be a little lighter, our hearts and minds will be a little more open, and pathways to social inclusion and justice will become clearer with all of you here for this once in a career, or perhaps once in a lifetime, special week. Warm welcome here to Melbourne.
Thank you, everyone. I loved Joe's metaphor of the air becoming lighter as we meet, and you're actually joining us in the middle of winter. It was the winter solstice a couple of days ago, so the days will literally become lighter as we meet over the coming week. I do hope you all have your jackets and umbrellas, though, nonetheless. Joe also talked about the bidding process for this, and Joe led an earlier bid. It took us a couple to get there, but with Katie Hughes, who was mentioned, I was there delivering the bid for this Congress, and I was talking to some others who were there at an ISA meeting 7 years ago now today. So that's a long time. Isabella, I'm not sure where you are. You might say that's not really that long. Yeah, but for the rest of us, it's a long time to be involved with an ISA project. It's longer than I spent in high school. And the process of the last 7 years has probably had all the dramas of a good high school TV show or movie, with a few tears and lots of laughter along the way. And I guess at the end of this week, we'll all walk towards the camera and put our hand in the air and say we made it. But I did want to just thank the LOC for going through this with me together, and well done for making it to the end. So now I have the wonderful pleasure of being able to introduce Professor Alphia Possamai-Inesedy, who is the current president of the Australian Sociological Association. Welcome, Alphia.
Bujari Gamorawa. Hello and welcome in the language of Darug, the lands on which I live and work. I would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of those unceded lands that have provided me with a place to live, work, and make contributions back to its land and its peoples. I also wish to acknowledge that we are on the unceded lands of the Wurundjeri Woi Wurrung people of the Kulin Nation. As we saw in the opening ceremony, we acknowledge the living culture and the unique role in the spiritual, social, economic, and environmental well-being of this land that the Wurundjeri contribute to. We pay our respect to elders past, present, and emerging, and I would like to extend that respect to any First Nations people present here today. I'm delighted to welcome you. It's wonderful to see so many people here joining us from across the globe on behalf of the Australian Sociological Association, an association that I have been a long member of and am very proud to be president of. With almost 800 members, we are very committed to interdisciplinary collaboration, critical analysis, of course, as sociologists, and social justice. I would like to echo the thanks that have been expressed to the LOC and the ISA, but I really do want to pay special attention and thanks to Dan and all the work that he has done over the years to get us to this space, because he truly has done amazing work, and it has been quite a long time, but he has made quite a few miraculous things occur to have us all come here together. So thank you very much. And to Sally Daly, our Executive Officer of TASA. She does exceptional work. So we are certainly meeting at a time of disruption and transformation. Across the globe, I've already sat in on a couple of talks where it's quite clear many of us are contending with issues of academic freedom, but also the impacts of neoliberalism on the higher education sector as a whole. In Australia right now, we are currently going through the most comprehensive review of higher education that we've had for several decades. And within it, we are being asked to consider what is the function of a university, what is the responsibility of a university. These types of questions and what has been happening in Australia, and I would imagine in many other countries, certainly impacts on our discipline. what we teach, how we research on the future of our discipline as a whole. And I would argue that collectively, we as sociologists must contribute to the debate to push the boundaries of the largely instrumental approach that we are increasingly facing globally in terms of how higher education is changing. We're also meeting at a time, as Sari has indicated, where there's a debate of transformation occurring within Australia. As we meet for this Congress, Australia is currently undergoing an important democratic process, the Voice referendum. The Voice referendum in Australia is a significant step toward achieving constitutional recognition and advancing the rights of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. This referendum seeks to provide a formal mechanism for the voices to be heard to enshrine an Indigenous voice into the Constitution, something which has not been mandated to this time. It will empower Indigenous peoples to shape decisions that affect their lives and communities, and is an opportunity to address the types of historical injustices that the young Wiradjuri woman highlighted to us at the beginning of our coming together this evening. So I really encourage, we've got a number of wonderful sessions where we can debate these types of topics, and I am really struggling to fit all the sessions I want to go to in, but for us to really reflect on the importance of constitutional recognition, its implications for social research, policy development, and community engagement. I also ask us to really consider our work as sociologists and how that contributes to the framing of higher education as a whole, as well as what is the role, what is the function of a university. So welcome. I'm very pleased to welcome you here on behalf of TASA. If you are interested in more information about the Voice referendum, there is a lot of information out there. Every university is engaging with it, and there is a lot of open access information. You can, if you're writing anything down, a really easy one to access, and just a little plug for my own university, Western Sydney University referendum, the Indigenous Voice to Parliament, has a really wonderful array of information there that has been put together by our Deputy Vice Chancellor, Indigenous leadership. So thank you, and have a great Congress.
And now it's my pleasure to invite Professor Sari Hanafi back to the stage. It's time for an award.
On behalf of ISA's Selection Committee and the Executive Committee, I am so honored to announce this year the winner of the ISA Award for Excellence in Research and Practice, Rowan Connell. She is a professor emeritus at the University of Sydney since her retirement in 2014. She has a long career as a professor of sociology in this university, with other appointments as a visiting professor in many prestigious universities worldwide. She is known for the concept of hegemonic masculinity and her book, Southern Theory, that I use in my class, theory class at my university, American University of Beirut. She was a pioneer in the area of research on social justice and gender relationships. She has been sensitive to the effect of colonialism for indigenous people and enslavement. This award doesn't look only at the research portfolio, but also to the commitment to society. Rowan is known for her political engagement in Australian society and beyond. A few years ago, I was waiting to meet her in Beirut, but Rowan, I am so glad now I am in your country, welcoming you. So please join me in welcoming Rowan Collins. Rowan? Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you very much. All right. There you are. Lovely word. Thank you. Thank you so much. Friends, I now get a few minutes to make a kind of speech in reply. I would like to start too by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we're meeting, the Wurundjeri people, in this place called Naarm in the local language. We are also, of course, in the city of Melbourne, in the state of Victoria, formerly the colony of Victoria. And these places have a different name and a different logic of the name. They were named after a couple of English aristocrats, one a queen, one a prime minister, who never set foot here. And the contrast, I think, between the names tells you a lot, actually, about Australian history. Thank you, Sari, for your kind introduction, and thank you to ISA for this award. I'm honoured and I'm moved by this. I hope also that the award will be understood as recognising not just an individual, but the creative work of all the groups whose contribution in many forms has made possible the work that has my name on it, and which also has a component of midnight oil in my study. I am, of course, a little bit backward in technology, you will understand. But very specifically, I want to mention the groups involved, the research teams I've been involved in, the intellectual networks, the fellow teachers, the office workers in the universities where I've worked, the maintenance workers who've kept the universities functioning, the technical experts, and of course the students who've also been part of an intellectual life. I mention this, it is an important fact, and I think very important to me, that the knowledge in sociology and in other disciplines as well, of course, is fundamentally the product of collective labour. And collective labour, of course, implies a workforce, which I've just been naming, and significant parts of which are here in this room. And I think it's important to make this point, to register this fact, because the situation of this workforce is now increasingly precarious. If we look around us at the scene of internationally as well as locally of higher education and research, we see a very increased level of casualisation of teaching workforces and research. We see outsourcing of support staff and breaking down the personal connections which have been important in making these institutions work. We see managements engaging in arbitrary restructures which shape the fates of many of our colleagues and co-workers. We see governments, many of which are negative about universities, if not actively hostile. We see some of the authoritarian movements that Sari has mentioned who are seriously antagonistic to universities. So when you put all of this together, it seems to me we have reached something of a crisis situation in terms of the sustainability of the knowledge workforce that we are part of. And this, I think, is an important issue that sociologists have to face professionally as well as personally in their own institutional lives. Now, what we do about this is still in many ways unclear, but obviously enough, we should be joining our unions. We should be defending our workplaces against external attacks, and perhaps thinking of restructuring our projects in the new situation. Well, I joined the sociological workforce nearly 60 years ago, and that was a time when the world seemed to be in flames. There was a very brutal war going on. There was a spread of nuclear weapons. There was a rise of organised racism in some parts of the world. There was a massive gap between wealth and poverty on a world scale. Some of that must sound familiar today too, I'm sorry to say. At that time, when I was beginning in the trade, there were also movements of revolt and movements for reconstruction. And those movements seemed to have needs for knowledge that would be relevant, that would be the best and most powerful knowledge that they could have. And that, I guess, is the logic, if you like, under which I started my research career and has led me through the different parts of the research and teaching that I've done, starting perhaps in issues around class inequality in education, moving through a large diversion into issues around gender, moving eventually into considerations about the global economy of knowledge and the project of Southern theory. Well, some of those projects were responding to matters of great urgency, to immediate needs, such as work on the related to the AIDS pandemic, the HIV pandemic. Some of them were longer-term issues from thinking about needs of theoretical understanding, such as my work on masculinities. But all of them, in one way or another, I have hoped would produce knowledge that was relevant for practice, relevant especially for groups who are in struggle for social justice or even for sheer survival. It seemed to me that there are always alternative paths into the future. The social structures are dynamic, they change, they produce change. Social practice is always creative, producing new effects through time. And that means there are always possibilities for movement towards social justice. But there are also possibilities of producing monsters, and social change has produced monsters. Monsters of hatred, monsters of how do we put this? Of mass poverty, of many forms of inequality, movements of monsters of communicable disease, which have powerful social determinants. So sociologists too, dealing with these issues professionally, as we do, also face choices about the future we will have collectively as a discipline. And there is a possibility that the future, if we compromise with the funders, we may find mainstream sociology doing big data for PricewaterhouseCoopers. We may find it doing little ethnographies about the dangerous classes on behalf of the security state. But we're not condemned to that future. We're not condemned to the new feudalism, and we're not condemned to old intellectual frameworks either. My career is pretty near its end, but I am optimistic for what you and sociology collectively can do. So to the next generation, many of whom are in the room with us, I give my best wishes. I have seen sociology do better in the past. For instance, when we were creating the sociology of gender, when sociology began its big turn towards anti-colonial, post-colonial perspectives, and now in the very important and fascinating work that is being done around the social determinants of climate change and social responses to environmental catastrophe. So I really do have optimism for a possible future. And I will leave you with my advice to that next generation. 4 very short points. 1, study the big issues, the biggest issues that you can. Secondly, have confidence in your science, in your capacities to produce and circulate knowledge. Thirdly, serve the people, not the billionaires. And finally, above all, be bold. Thank you.
Congratulations, Raywin, and thank you for that call to boldness. Raywin, I think my fellow sociologists in the room, even those with the most ego about the quality of their own work would recognise Raywin, I think, as the biggest name in Australian sociology. Really, truly a superstar who does amazing work. But also, and these two things don't always go together, able to understand her own life in sociological terms. That it's a life lived recognising the importance of community to scholarship and to our society. So we see that in her work beyond the academic sphere for her colleagues with the union and her public engagements around the future of universities here and abroad. But I also say, you also see it in the little things. She has a willingness to support Australian sociologists at all their career points. That's really heartening and one that I've benefited from myself. So congratulations, Raywin, so well deserved. I now want to welcome to the stage Professor Ashok Tamba, who is the coordinator of the ISA's worldwide competition for junior sociologists, as well as a member of the executive committee. Okay, over to you.
Hi, everyone. Actually, it's an honor to be here at this stage after Raywin and to present the ISA Worldwide Competition for Junior Sociologists, who should be bold, actually. All right. And before that, I would like to say quite a few words about this competition and the overall attitude of ISA towards younger generations. ISA has always been trying to develop certain, mechanisms to promote younger generations of sociologists and open up new venues to integrate them into a larger global networks of sociology. And for that matter, we have organized, ISA has organized some PhD labs and also early career sociologist sessions, and also writing and publication workshops. All of them were quite, helpful for new generations of sociologists. But I think among them, this worldwide competition for junior sociologists is one of the most important of them all, to touch upon the lives of and making a difference in the lives of younger generation of sociologists. So I'm so much honored to be the chair of that committee of this competition, and work together with Professor Bandana Purkayasta and Laura also, I'm sure they are in the salon, under the leadership of our president, Sari Hanafi. And we are actually choosing 12 finalists and 3 winners for this competition, among many, dozens of wonderful papers, actually. And then for the time shortage, I was told that I should only invite and read the names of the trio winners. And then, but the names of the finalists are on the internet that we have prepared and very valuable, vibrant pre-Congress just before this Congress started. And we have been there together with, again, Dan, Sari, Laura and I. And also he had involved lots of, really brilliant graduate students. And we had lovely 3 days, very fruitful, productive, vibrant. And also at the end, there was a reward like jumping together with the kangaroos and also going to those, lovely sanctuary. And we have benefited a lot from his hospitality. And thank you so much, Dan. And also, all right. Actually, I have told our young colleagues that we will present them during this session. And if they are present in the saloon, please come forward. And okay, let me just read their names. And we have 3 winners, as I've told you before. One of them, in the first rank, we have Nadia de Silva from Sri Lanka, that Sari also. She had this. She earned this prize with a paper titled "Post-Conflict Neoliberal Microfinance Debt Crisis: The Tragedy of the Sri Lankan Rural Women." Congratulations, Nadia. So now we have another female, young woman actually, Ji-young Kim from South Korea, from the University of Nanterre, Paris. Where are you, Ji? Yes, she is coming. She has earned this prize with a paper titled "Gentrifying Otherness, Diversity and Whiteness in the Restaurant in the Canal Saint-Martin neighborhood in Paris." Thank you so much, Ji-young, for your contribution. Also, we have from Argentina, we have actually Dr. Maximiliano Marentes. He has earned his PhD, and he's from the National University of San Martin, Argentina. And he's coming. And yeah, unfortunately here, the title of his paper written in Spanish, I cannot read it, but it was, okay, I remember that it was about the, LGBTQI people's close, intimate relationships, and it's about the, question of equality and inequality within those relations. Thank you very much. Okay. Thank you. All right. Thank you so much for joining us, and we wish good luck to all those, new generation sociologists.
Thank you, Aisha, and thank you to that whole committee. I've had the pleasure of hosting that group this week since Tuesday and showing them some of this city, but we also, as you heard, got out to Healesville Sanctuary to see some kangaroos and koalas. And I have a feeling they thought that was a much bigger highlight than my paper that I gave during the workshop, but I think that is absolutely fine. The papers from the junior scholars, the early career academics, were truly exceptional. And to be able to host them felt, in a way, like a coming full circle for me, because my very, very first engagement in ISA as a junior scholar myself, was at one of the PhD laboratories, which is a similar event to this. And I made some lifetime friends there, and also saw some amazing scholarship. I think the best part of an ISA experience, a Congress or anything else, is when you get to see a paper where you know that you're seeing a star of the future before they're recognised as a star. And then you can know that in a Congress or two you'll be able to say, I was a fan before they were big. So congratulations to all the winners. So now it's my pleasure to introduce Jun Han, the Vice Chair of the Local Organising Committee for South Korea in the World Congress of Sociology in 2027. So, welcome.
Dear ISA and the Australian Sociological Association members, distinguished delegates and friends from all over the world, good evening. It is a great pleasure and honor for me to introduce and invite all of you to Gwangju, the next venue of 21st World Congress of ISA. Thank you. My name is Jun Han. I'm the co-chair of the Local Organizing Committee for the 21st ISA World Congress of Sociology. First of all, I would like to convey sincere congratulations for the successful opening of the Melbourne Congress. I'm deeply moved and impressed by your passion and creativity in preparing this Congress. I still remember the excitement and joy when Gwangju was selected as next venue of ISA Congress in 2027. Without your warm-hearted support, it would not have been possible. And once again, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to all of you. I invite all of you to Gwangju now, Korea, in 2027 to expand your horizon of sociological knowledge and have a new experience of Korea.
To prepare for a new tomorrow, to welcome our new selves, we are breathing new life into a place we already know so well. We are ready for mice.
Well, this is an official movie. Well, I would like to summarize what Korea has experienced over, a few decades in several minutes. Since the end of Korean War in 1953, Korea has been divided for 70 years. Geopolitics surrounding the peninsula has long been crucial in keeping peace in the region. From transition from authoritarianism to, last half century has witnessed Korea rising from ruin and rubble to leading position in the world economy with rapid industrialization, and transition from authoritarianism to democracy, and its consolidation followed industrialization. The Republic of Korea stands as a successful case of the third wave of global democratization during the 1980s and is considered a representative example of achieving both industrialization and democracy in a short period of time. In this Korean history, Gwangju is symbolized as the birthplace of the May 18 People's Uprising for Democracy in 1980, and as a sacred place for democratization in Korea. Considering the immeasurable symbolic value and the significance of Gwangju with its democratization movement listed in the UNESCO Memory of the World Register, the city deserves to host the next ISA Congress, I truly believe. Now, I'd like to invite all of you to the host city, Gwangju, and take a look at the city. As a city of UNESCO's Triple Crown, Gwangju offers opportunities for fascinating media art and other visual experiences. You can also enjoy one of the most beautiful natural sceneries in Korea, designated as UNESCO Global Geopark in 2018. You can explore the history of democratization movement in Gwangju, as well as the world record heritage of the May 18 People's Uprising for Democracy. Lastly, for many Korean gourmets, Gwangju is the home of delicious Korean food representing Korean life and nature. It's definitely an ideal place to savor Korean cuisine and interact with locals as well. Local organizing committee of the Korean Sociological Association promises a grand festival of sociology across the whole city of Gwangju. The Korean Sociological Association was founded to contribute to Korean social and cultural advancement through sharing expertise in the field of sociology and social sciences in 1956. For the last half-century, the Korean Sociological Association has spared no effort in making meaningful academic contribution to the general public, the media, and national policies by addressing the current social issues in Korean society and placing them on the academic agenda. Korean Sociological Association aims to expand its responsibility by hosting the next ISA World Congress of Sociology with the intention of sharing experiences and fostering a desire to learn about the most up-to-date social issues and knowledge. We will focus on making ISA Congress a festival for all, meaning not only for sociologists, but also for the citizens, nation and worldwide, and extending to the global. Special sessions will be organized to explore diverse social activities, and the sessions will revolve around unique venues of Gwangju, providing opportunities to examine the civil activities and social affairs. Public programs, including the cinema nights and media art exhibition, will be open free to all the participants. And additionally, chicken and beer, called in Korea, chimak, party will be arranged for free, where participants can enjoy the popular dish in Korea with K-pop music and scenic nightscape of Gwangju. Gwangju is a home to many different cultures, and exciting social festivals and cultural events will be held in and around the Congress venue, and the citizens will welcome participants with open arms. Lastly, the local organizing committee will organize a valuable pre- and post-tour program, and Gwangju is ready to welcome all of you in 2027.
얘기해본 적 없잖아. 꿈속에서 널 만났던가 지나가다 널 봤었던가 자꾸 눈이 마주친 다는 건 너도 나를 보고 있단 거 굳이 애쓰지 않아도 닿을 것 같아 묻지 않아도 너를 알 것 같아 Say that you wanna love me Just say that you feel the same way I do I know you have been looking at me Just say that you feel the same way I do 너와 뭔가 있을 것 같아 알 수 없는 일이 생길 것만 같아 서두르고 싶진 않지만 사랑은 타이밍 지금이야 Just say it 굳이 애쓰지 않아도 닿을 것 같아 묻지 않아도 너를 알 것 같아 Say that you wanna love me Just say that you feel the same way I do I know you have been looking at me Oh, just say that you feel the same way I do I know you have been looking at me I know you have been looking for me Say that you feel the same way I do
Well, this is also official video clip, and I didn't expect it to be this long. And you must be very hungry, and I apologize. Well, I very much hope to have a wonderful experience in Gwangju in 2027, and we'll work hard to make your visit a once-in-a-lifetime experience. Thank you very much, and I'll see you in Gwangju.
Thank you, Junhan. Who's thinking about chicken and beer right now? The president of Taza Alphia and I were walking to the venue today, and she did turn to me and ask me whether I would do it again, host the World Congress of Sociology, and I said no. No, this is what I meant was that I'm not going to do another one. This is a once-in-a-lifetime thing, hosting a World Congress. But if you mean, am I grateful that I've hosted this one, that we've brought you here? I would say absolutely. Even with another event that I really, really do hope is once in a lifetime, the once-in-a-lifetime pandemic, touch wood, that we've experienced in the last 3 years, it was absolutely worth it. It's a wonderful experience to bring the world's best sociologists to your place and share your sociology, but also your home with your colleagues. So, Junhan, good luck to you and to your whole team. I cannot wait to visit and be part of a World Congress where I'm not the LSE chair. And I really, really look forward to learning more about what you'll have on the academic program, but also the food and culture. The images of the food and that chicken and beer festival, it definitely made me sit up. I think it might be getting close to that time of night, but we have a little bit more to go, and it's very exciting to be able to whet our appetites for our food at the welcome reception with the presidential address. So it's now my great pleasure to invite back to the stage Professor Sari Hanafi.
Just a small note. When Isabella and I went to inspect the venue in South Korea, I got 2 kilos more in my belly. Yeah. So the risk is there. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom. It was the age of fullness. It was a season of light. It was a season of darkness. It was the spring of hope. It was the winter of despair. We had everything before us. We have everything. We have nothing before us. This is how Charles Dickens started his 1859 historical novel, A Tale of Two Cities. I feel the same ambivalent feelings, which reflect a faithful description of vastly mixed judgments of present conditions of late modernity. In this talk, I will focus on entangled pathologies of late modernity in the political, socio-economic, and cultural spheres. I don't need to convince you that authoritarianism is spreading all over in the south and in the north, but also populism, particularly in the north. Also, increasingly, people move to the right, as you see with this map, the bullish color, center right, right wing, and far right are spreading all over the world. But what is more critically, people move to the populist right. As we see here, if we take the case of 8 well-established European democracies, support for those parties in the last 4 elections went clearly up in all countries except Norway, as the work of Jean-Eric Grenheim shows. In the socioeconomic sphere, there are increasing trends of inequality, precarity, and exclusion. These create, in turn, a sense of increased vulnerability, and it concerns mainly those who were once part of the growing middle class. And, of course, more violence. Just look to what happened to the Yellow Jacket movement in France. In the cultural sphere, there is hierarchical polarization of society, which will be manifested by eroding the space between different elite formations. Of course, the political failure of the Arab Spring reflect that, as we saw, for instance, the mistrust between the secular and the religious elites. So we have 3 entangled causes this time that correlate with the late modernity symptoms: neoliberalism, emotional capitalism, and the crisis of the liberal democracy. I will share more on the first 2 causes now, and I will leave the last to be the core of this talk. Of course, when I refer to neoliberalism, you know, I mean withdrawal of state, but mainly financialization, and I don't need to expand more, you know more than me. But emotional capitalism, it's really very important phenomenon, especially in the last quarter of century, which is a commodification of emotion and intrusion of capitalism into the private sphere. Eva Ilou's work is amazing. who argue emotional uncertainty in the realm of love, romance, and sex is a direct sociological effect of the way in which the consumer market, therapeutical industry, and the technology of the internet have been assembled and embedded by the ideology of individual choice that has become the main cultural frame organizing personal freedom. Sorry. There is something wrong. Okay. Some theorize cultural legitimization of sexual choice as it is based on purely subjective emotion and hedonic grounds. But is really this emotional subjective? Raymond Williams, a British socialist writer, forced the concept of structure of feeling to allude to a historical understanding of an affective element of consciousness and relationships, the need to understand emotions, moods, and atmosphere as a historical and socio-phenomena that has only become more acute in the era of social networking, artificial intelligence, and ubiquitous media, all permeated by commodities and advertisement culture. How does sociology react to the pathology of late modernity? I am a Palestinian and a French sociologist. By the way, when students ask me, who am I tell them that I am Palestinian during the day and French in the evening. So just to, so that a human being can be more than one. And my reflection and example for this talk drew from the wide variety of contexts by particularly upon my experience as someone who studied in France and lived in different locations in the Middle East. I will argue that much of the sociology's responses can be characterized as classically liberal but politically illiberal, what I call symbolic liberalism or the symbolic liberal project. It is an ideal type rather than a categorization of the characteristics of some sociologists. So no one is purely symbolic liberal, and I am probably one of them. Symbolic liberalism is not the product of sociology alone, as it reflects changes in other sectors of public life, including media, politics, law, and education. Interestingly, these changes concern not only the global north, but also global south, and under the effect of global convergence. In response, I propose a dialogical sociology as a form of a balance between collective and individual political liberal project. The hierarchical polarization of society is everywhere, including in the campus and media. The elite fragmentations is not something new. What is new is the intolerance in the societal debate, including media, with position taking instead of arguments. While the right has usually denounced what is considered cancel culture, I would like to remind ourselves that the cancel culture comes from the left as well as from the right. Cancel culture alarmed many scholars who signed a letter on justice and open debate, defining it as an intolerance of opposing view, a vogue of public shaming and ostracism, and the tendency to dissolve complex policy issues in a blinding moral certainty. We are already paying the price in greater risk aversion among academics, artists, and journalists who fear for their livelihoods if they depart from the apparent consensus within their camp. This is associated with a spread of cultural safetyism among administrators who, in a spirit of panic damage control, deliver hastily and disproportionately punishments against professors who are investigated for quoting work of literature in class and not giving trigger warnings to students. I will not give example from the Arab world where academic freedom is really catastrophic, but I will show how such cancel culture has spread in two liberal countries, France and US. According to statistics of the Foundation of Individual Rights and Expression, FIRE, in USA, 149 professors were targeted for their speech in 2022, compare 30 professors in 2015. So you see the tremendous increase. Scholars were likely to be targeted for their expression on hot-button issues such as partisanship, gender, and for their view on institutional policy. 2/3 of incidents come from the left of the scholar. Incidents also involve counseling talks in American campuses about the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. This upset the sensitivity of some students. Such cancellation letters from provosts often don't say who were the students whose feelings were hurt and those whose were not. When it comes to the case of France, I will focus here on intolerant debate about the decolonial turn of the social sciences. Part of the problem is related to the continuity of the colonial legacy in education. We know that many scholars have addressed this legacy, including Annabel Quijano, Germander Bambra, John Hanbod, Ali Mergi, Stéphane Dufoy, etc. While one can critically engage on this scholarship, personally, I wrote an article in Sociology in 2019. Nevertheless, a witch hunt was waged in France against what was called decolonialism and labeled it as a pseudoscience. Again, there was little argument or debate, only position taking. 76 academics, writers, and journalists signed a petition against decolonialism and established Observatory of Decolonialism against Pseudoscience. Following that, an international workshop after reconstructing science and culture was held in Sorbonne in January 2022, inaugurated by the French Minister of Education, Jean-Michel Blanquer. A few months earlier, the same participant in the workshop has signed a petition that qualifies anti-Semitic the analysis of Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, and the French scholars who had considered the Israeli practice in the Palestinian territories as apartheid. Later on, those who criticized the Israeli colonial practice were labeled as Islamo-leftist. So let us now locate symbolic liberalism. You know that classical liberal sense look refer to individuals who hold liberal values such as individual freedom and substantive economic rights, but government economic regulatory power. They consider human rights as a fundamental and universal, emphasizing civil and individual liberties, freedom of religion, speech, press, and the value of individual autonomy. Thus, classical liberalism is not about economic liberal views, as some scholars, and particularly French, often understand it, but more about social views. Classical liberalism is not only an individual liberties, but also a sense of justice for society. Let me point out the seminal work of John Rawls, who in early 70s wrote the book A Theory of Justice. By balancing liberties and equality, he offered two principles: the allocation of equal material goods to all members of society, strict egalitarian principle, and the primary goods to be to the greatest benefit of the least advantaged member of society, the difference principle. The way Rawls is conceived, primary goods give people the opportunity to do what they would like with their own life, what he called conception of the good. So, just to be clear, what is the conception of the good? It's a set of final aims which specify a person's conception of what is of value in human life. It includes one's preference and desire regarding dress, food, ideals of personal characters, friendship, and family, etc. Of course, all that will be discussed in the public spheres and yield laws and moral arguments, a process in which culture is not really important. As you see, culture is not really important. However, starting from mid-80s, Rawls realized that we live in the age of pluralism. He argued that primary goods, health, education, human rights, are only one part of goods, and society wants to keep diversity and pluralistic conceptions of the good while ensuring social cohesion. These conceptions are often based on comprehensive doctrines like religion, philosophical doctrine, and so on. He underlines that while many comprehensive doctrines exist in society, people still cooperate because they agree on political conceptions based on constitutional rules. For example, people with different beliefs will all agree to pay for poor people, even having different moral reasoning. It might be by solidarity, Republican conception, or by religious duty, religious conception, or because they want to avoid theft, utilitarian conception. To go beyond the individual act, they all need to formulate the moral reasoning in a political concept accessible to all the citizens. This kind of justification will be called public reason. The liberal state will ensure that society reach one unified conception of justice that would be neutral concerning people conceptions of the goods. So the state deal only with the conception of justice. Needless to say, Rawlsian liberalism has many problems. But since the publication of his book in 1993, this political liberal project has been enhanced and amended by many scholars who have been working on different aspects of Rawlsian project. For feminists, the question of care is central for understanding cooperation between individuals. For instance, Elena Bulcini work, and they problematize what is private versus public spheres. Jürgen Habermas, Maeve Koch, showed the tension gravitating around dogmatism and open-mindedness on the danger of shutting down the public sphere from debate and opening it to a variety of valid opinions, including religious arguments. Also, Cécile Laborde, Amartya Sen, but above all, really, the liberal communitarianists who have dealt with the excessive individualistic conception of roles. Michael Sandel, Charles Taylor, Amitai Etzioni, Michael Balzer, Abdi Kazanpour, Nassif Nassar, all who struck a balance between autonomy and dependency, freedom and relating to a collective, and emphasize responsibility before freedom. So let me move now to show where is the problem with this, those who are politically, classically liberal but politically illiberal, symbolic liberalists. The question now I raise, so does sociology's response to pathologies of late modernity respect this kind of amended version of political liberalism? As I meant, so let's look to what happened to political liberalism. First of all, we have problem of deflating the concept of social justice. Symbolic liberals are less interested in the effect of inequality than defending the question of rights. Class analysis was downplayed at the nation state and global level. Little interest is shown in global issues such as global poverty and unjust dynamics in the global economy. So this is go down, shrink. Now, they have power as they are part of symbolic capitalism and are active actors in polarized society. The African-American sociologist Musa al-Gharb, in his forthcoming book, defends symbolic capitalism as a new class of social elites who have not attained their social position by owning material assets, nor by developing or trading material goods or service. Instead, they traffic in symbols and rhetoric, image and narratives, data and analysis, ideal and abstraction. He developed some thought on the American context, arguing that despite their express commitment to egalitarianism, symbolic capitalists' idiosyncratic lifestyles are fundamentally premised on exclusion, exploitation, and condescension. The communities they live in and the institutions they dominate are among the most unequal in American society. That is, symbolic capitalism are among the primary beneficiaries of the very inequality they condemn. In this manner, the broader issue of economic inequality and social justice are lost. The cultural left focuses on identity politics and cannot create a unified vision that can appeal to a broader range of people. In The Deaths of the Left, Simone Windlow and Stephen Hall then identify the root causes of the left's maladies in how new cultural obsessions replaced core unified principle, social class struggle. Concerning the human rights, so justice, you have social justice, and you have human rights. Concerning human rights, symbolic liberals rather stress identities as a locus of rights and defend individualistic choice, both assumed to be universal. Despite the fragmentation of identity under subcultural politics, the symbolic liberal project consider that conception of the good above all conceptions and enforce it into society by extending norms and deculturalize them. Here, I would like to highlight two issues: the universality of human rights and the identity politics. Concerning the first, the most important universal value, which are documented with the greatest global consensus, are the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. This declaration was understood not as a constellation of abstract concepts, but as a concrete legal system. Specific cultures were not considered as defining any of these concepts, nor could these principles suffer from adaptation to local conditions. When it comes to the identity politics, change happens at dizzying speed. In the past, identity relied on national or regional allegiance, but concerned a large population. Nowadays, identities rely on subculture defined by a limited and external set of traits: race, sexual preference, eating habits, often against internal other. These new identity groups seek protection by law and international convention without taking into account how some of these rights can enter into tension with the other group. So this is what I mean by inflating of this. The third problem with the symbolic liberalism is the hegemonic conception of the good. Because of their highly symbolic capital, certain symbolic liberals are capable of influencing their conception of the good, and they will push it into the formal public sphere that is dominated by them, and use mainly law and force it over society. This means they sell their conception of the good as a universalistic conception of justice. The flagrant example I have in my mind now is the question of the Muslim headscarf in France. Wearing a headscarf is an inherent part of some pious women's conception of the good, what to dress. Banning this headscarf in the name of conception of justice, gender discrimination, or in the name of violation of the principle of neutrality of the public school vis-à-vis religions is a violation of the will of many French Muslims to have their conception of the good and even conception of freedom of freedom of religion. The same argument should be addressed to the Iranian authorities which impose one conception of the good on the population by forcing all women to put a headscarf in a public space. While the hegemonic conception of the good is formally allowed to be debated in a formal public sphere, symbolic liberal, like their opponent, the conservative, now tend to move the debate in the direction of issuing regulation and law while neglecting the fluidity of moral accommodation that people use to carry out to resolve tension. Beautiful concepts such as tolerance, which embody the relationship between different conceptions of goods, become a site of dislike, disapproval, and regulation. In her seminal book, Woody Brown pointed out how tolerance is heavy with norms that consolidate the dominance of the powerful and sustain the abjection of the tolerated and equate the intolerant with the barbaric. While ethics and law must be a daily labor of restricting negative feelings, for symbolic liberals, disgust can be trusted as a basis for lawmaking, again, like their conservative. As this has been shown in the work of Martha Nussbaum, do the French cultural majoritarianism discuss the burkini on the beach, and this is why they ban it? I think so. In the same vein, in a Muslim majority city in Lebanon, Saida, one cannot find pork meat as it disgusts its inhabitants. Olivier Roy shows us how the extension of individual freedom, political and sexual, since the 60s led to a paradoxical extension of normative systems. Inflation of law and regulation concerning both the social life, workplace, garbage sorting, terms of address, a sort of bureaucratization of our life, and even the intimate life. For him, the nature of the emancipation projects has changed over time from being based on reason to becoming based on desire. The project enhanced individual liberties and particularly gender equality and allowed the control of one's own body. My body is my business. Of course, this will not be without contradiction and abuse of freedom, and this is why the movement of Me Too was so important. However, this emancipatory project went so far in establishing norm while understanding what shared culture used to regulate. Identity politics, victimhood, and the trauma become very important, and with it, an attempt of judicializing. This normativity has no axiological purpose of the good, a norm without value, but with a price to pay. This is the paradox of neoliberalism. A classical example is that you will sue a transport company for delaying your trip, even if this didn't cause you a major disruption. Litigation replaces what historically was negotiation between different social actors to reach fluid, reasonable accommodations and take into account culture and human relationships. The formal public sphere will be contested and will force those who felt marginalized and don't have access to it to create another public sphere. that I qualify as a communitarian one or collective one for liberal state, and the virtual one for authoritarian state. The second public sphere will privilege the cooperation between collective actors more through moral accommodation than through issuing law. Let me move to my dream project, dialogical political liberal project. As the emergence of symbolic liberalism become the symptom and the contributing causes of late modernity, we are in multiple crises, and we need to rethink our normativity to establish what I call dialogical political liberal project that has 4 features. First, a dialogical liberal project rehabilitates social justice by more commitment to social class analysis and give it the overarching position in any intersectional analysis. Of course, this will be context sensitive, but I will say in the footsteps of Michel Viviorca, we should not lose sight that race, ethnicity, gender, and sexuality should complement an analysis of a class and not the other way around. Second, when it comes to question of human rights, a dialogical liberal project distinguish between universality of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the cultural particularity of each system of human rights. So you have Australian system, you have Syrian system, Lebanese system, but there is a universality of the Universal Declaration as an abstract terms. The right to culture is an inherent part of this declaration and should be balanced with the promotion and protection of all human rights and fundamental freedoms. Third, beyond the unified conception of justice, how to go back to pluralistic conception of the good without imposing a hegemonic one. For this reason, a dialogical liberal project is not only sensitive to culture, but also to power. To handle the conception of the good to be hegemonic and to reach the best policy for social justice, it should be first deliberation in the public sphere before a consensus around it may emerge. However, it is often important that the opposition remain capable of forming social movements as a mechanism of balancing power and making their voice heard. As the case, for instance, of last movement in France about retirement, or in Tunisia, or in the United States, US Black Lives Matters. Sometimes a revolution is needed as a case of protracted brutalizing despotic regime in Syria or Bahrain or elsewhere. Of course, the neoliberal emotional capitalism should be undermined as much as we can, and the culture, we emphasize the shared culture at the expense of this expanding subcultures. The dialogical liberal project doesn't rely only in liberal institutional arrangement as Rawls heavily does, but rehabilitate the fluidity of moral argumentation in society, including how individuals and communities exercise Montesquieu's du commerce in their societal everyday arrangement. So the ethics, we return to the importance of moral reasoning and how we resolve the problem of noise after 10 o'clock in the evening instead of calling the police, using the law to negotiate with our neighbor and invite him or her to the party. So this is the du commerce. Against individualistic political liberalism, Dialogical sociology rehabilitates, care, and connect itself to the convivialist movement, to the Gennaro Iorio and Silvia Cataldi conception of social love, and to Helmut Rosa conception of resonance and relational approach to well-being. Let me move to my last session, some implication of dialogical liberal project. Rowan today asked us to be bold, so bear with me, I will be bold. So let us put it clear. I would like to bring example how to apply this project to some critical issue related to social organization of society and the question of identity. In each case, there is an issue of how to reinforce the unified conception of justice and leave space for a pluralistic conception of the good. So, if I take the case of social classes, here we need to ensure a universal minimum income that has been advocated by Thomas Piketty, by the convivialist movement, but also affordable education and health for all education. This is part of the conception of justice. Some issues will be controversial, whether to give priority to work to national versus migrant, or about retirement issues. So these issues should be considered rather in the conception of the good that should be heavily debated in the public spheres. So matter of negotiation, social movement, and so on. I can bring about social organization another example from nature. Needless to say, how to move from thinking society to society nature, how to think slow growth, environmental justice, to make it all as a conception of justice, but the conception of the good, such as Bone Vivere, good living, that conceptualized by Eduardo Godinez, and who inspired social movement in South America. This is, for instance, it's a conception of good. However, and other things like common space, which is against private ownership. So what's important for me is how to rehabilitate the question of common space and impede what really hinders the sustainability of our development project, such as excessive carbon footprints and consumerism. These issues should not be part of the conception of the good, but move it up to be part of environmental justice. So this is really very important. Now, family authority. Family as a multiple forms is an inherent part of the conception of justice that society should come with to take into account social changes in our late modernity. Alas, I come from a region where the plurality of forms is still neither socially nor legally fully accepted. Yet, many scholars argue how family authority is eroding by both the liberal state and the force of neoliberal and emotional capitalism. For a long, both attempted to facilitate cheap mobile labor through undermining family as a salient social structure. Later on, countries like Sweden, Denmark, Canada, and Australia are known to removing kids from specific Aboriginal and migrant families to place them in culturally civilized family. I conduct research with some students about Sweden, and I will go in here to scrutinize it in details, where we see that much migrant families in Sweden are alienated from the bureaucratic power of the Social Welfare Council, even without a due legal process. In 2020, according to Swedish official statistics, 35,300 individuals were taken from their families and rehomed in a care sector, from which 19,400 children and adolescents were replaced with the foster families, according to this report. After manifestation in 3 cities, followed by a social media campaign against, under hashtag kidnapping kids in Sweden, the Swedish authorities reply in February 2023, accusing that social media accounts are with link to violent Islamist organization and warn of disinformation, violent threat made against the social services, and the possible risk of terror attacks in their wake. So what I am interested here is to show you that is it really a campaign by violent Islamic organization? Let's see who contested the Swedish policy. October 2009, the UN Children Committee report that this committee expressed its concern at the high number of children who have been removed from their families and live in foster home or their institutions. 2012, Nordic Committee for Human Rights for the Protection of Family Rights in Nordic countries wrote a 20-page report to the Secretary General of the Council of Europe on major abuse in the Swedish system to child in the name of protection of child, and criticizing what they called the foster home industry. They report that the foster family take monthly from state $2,500. Steve Westenberg, founder of this committee and renowned lawyer who won 8 cases in the European Court of Human Rights against Swedish social service state, they are kidnapping Muslim children. They don't accept that they have another way to live. Lena Surgen has a book. She's a Swedish forensic psychologist, also have a heavy criticism of the system. Also, Elizabeth Dohlen, who is an ombudsman for children to the Swedish government, proved that long-standing nature of the violation which some children being placed in care were being exposed to, and another report showing the same thing. So what, if you like, what I discuss at least at length this case to make evidence of 4 points. First, I want to show to which extent there is intolerance in the debate and how such a critique has been reported as a plot of violent Islamist organization. I hope my colleague here in Sweden to tell me whether there is any debate in the Swedish university about this. I know many hot potato issues now. The campus is last place to be debated. Second, how neoliberal state uses its authority and that of school over the family authorities instead of complementing it. Third, I am not fetishizing the family as a social structure. One can be gladly that the feminist movement has entered the state into the private sphere by regulating domestic violence. Yet, to be dialogical, we need to see how people are anxious about the family in its all form. Sorry. I do believe that because we are in a neoliberal age. The family is a salient social structure for protecting individual vis-à-vis the coercion of the state and the market, and for providing individual material and emotional support. Lastly, should the Republican school replace the family in its function? No, they should not. They should complement it. An example of this replacement one can find in several countries in how schools allow kids to transit sexually and start hormonal treatment without family consent. Again, the work of Eva Illouz and Claude Habib from France about these issues is important to realize that behind that is not only a personal choice, but capitalist forces and pharmaceutical lobby. In a nutshell, what I criticize is that extending individual rights to children means protecting them not from the family, but with the family. This is how a hegemonic conception of the good was imposed in the society. Just a few words about secularism. What is a conception of justice? Secularism as a mechanism and not as a value by itself. The value by itself is the liberal values, the political liberal values, and not the secularism. For this reason, as a conception of justice, secularism should be minimal and then context sensitive. So safe, we can define it minimally as a safe distance between religion and state, a minimum neutrality of a state, and then we need to see there is a very different how we will define religion, whether religion is allowed to be in the public spheres. Some country religion is still very important, centrality or not. All this is a matter of culture to be debated. And of course, I don't have time to develop here, but I'm very critical of the French secularism, which I consider it like putting everything as a conception of justice, while in fact it is, some issues is not about justice at all. It's about allowing different conception of justice. So let me take example of identity, LGBTQ. So I'm glad that LGBTQ movement in the West and some other regions in the world are becoming increasingly successful at awarding LGBT people rights, especially same-sex couple marriage, etc. Yet one should distinguish between what is related to conception of justice, acceptance, social and institutional recognition, and that of pluralistic conception of the good. Some countries gladly reach all forms of full visibility of all sexual orientation in the public spheres. However, others don't. Visibility, indeed, part of the conception of the good and how this will be regulated in the public sphere. Let me take the case of World Cup in Qatar. Everyone who cares about the conception of justice should denounce the criminalization of Qatari authorities of the LGBTQ community. And any criticism coming from the Arab world, from the entire world is very important. However, some argue that carrying the rainbow flag promoting LGBT plus is a part of the conflicting conception of the good that Qatari society should debate in the public sphere, and this is conceived by Qataris as a cultural imperialism. In this regard, the position of the Colombian professor in Columbia University, Joseph Mas'ad, in his book, Desiring Arab, is particularly interesting. He criticized culturally driven activism constructing homosexuality in society that traditionally didn't see sexual desire as fitting neatly into binary categories on the basis of the gender and sexual object choice. and didn't envisage sexual preferences as a basis of social identity. I found his position interesting in arguing for a culturally driven model of application of non-discrimination at the basis of sexual orientation, which is a conception of justice. In the same vein, one can question whether gender fluidity and delinking gender role from sex roles should be celebrated in all regions, and whether pleasure and desire can be deculturalized. Pleasure is indeed part of the conception of the good. Can parents claim the right of educating their kids on what constitutes the good life for them? If a community wants to celebrate heterosexual normativity in this, against the conception of justice, no discrimination against queer community. So this is a question. If a community wanted to celebrate heterosexual normativity in this, is this against the conception of justice? Can one argue that behind gender fluidity, a conception of the good that has its own metaphysics? I mean, celebrating ephemeral gender identity based on absolute pleasure? In the name of absolute pleasure, can a society or community tolerate polygamy and polyandry? Again, I don't mean here to essentialize any culture, neither to assume a uniformity of each culture. What I try to do is that if one considers the culture change and are not set in stone, then we should reflect on the power and the emotion as a structure of feelings influenced by social media and other things behind recognizing some aspect of gender fluidity. So I will go 2 minutes on conclusion. I will conclude. I am not sure that all the pathologies of our late modernity are related exclusively to the bad implementation of the political liberal project or to its theory. We need to have a critical assessment of both. I am not fetishizing any conception, whether Rawlsian or else, but I see humanity in a conversation about and come together to forge some universal conceptions and values. These conceptions are thin and they're abstract. These conceptions are thin in their abstraction form, but become thick when each society has the freedom and the capacity to debate them in light of its own circumstances. This is what I call soft universalism. By soft, I don't mean absolute relativism, which can lead to the myth of uniqueness, as I see in some Arab or Israeli sociology that I read. Differentiating between thick and thin moral terms is very important. Michael Walzer argued for thin set of universal principles should be adapted and or elaborated thickly to historical circumstances in order to give sense to what we mean by specific principle, social democracy, for instance, in a given context where some thick principles, distributive justice, are into play. In this meaning, these thin moral arguments often are more legitimate and useful one. Yet this minimal thin morality is very important, both for the sake of criticism and for the sake of international solidarity. This is why of course, we need international solidarity against what Qatari Authority did, for instance. Dialogical sociology rehabilitates a pluralistic conception of the good, balancing individual and collective rights. It starts not from metaphysical assumptions or abstract ideal, but from the world as it operates, namely as a culture in motion rather than culture as a fixed, homogeneous, and eternal entity. Dialogical sociology's utopia starts in the reality of existing social political arrangement, but also how individual, collective exercise Montesquieu du commerce. Thus, it is rather a compass that connects sociology to moral and political philosophy. It considers value that sociology defends are sociological and not only simply philosophical themes. This is very important, meaning that these values cannot be reasoned independently of how we experience them. My last paragraph, again, let me be clear. Dialogical sociology doesn't undermine the critical energy of approaches like Marxism, feminism, race studies, critical theory, but it is a call for a more situated criticism, one that will, while criticize powers, is also able to simultaneously open up a dialogue with a very forced ethic critiques. Those who know my scholarship on the Palestinian-Israeli conflict know how I can strongly criticize the current Israeli settler colonial projects in the Palestinian territories and engage in dialogue with the Israeli scholars. Let me stop here.